So usually I come in about 5 minutes before and let you know you got time for a cup of tea, but I hope you took the initiative and got one because it is now 10 o'clock. So why not crack on and start the session? So welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar on navigating the employee expectations in the next normal. This webinar is going to draw out some of the key learning that we have taken as the Innovation Beehive throughout lockdown, talking to our clients, running surveys, doing research, and seeking to understand the lay of the landscape for leaders and for HR teams in the next normal. So most of you know the Innovation Beehive. We exist to accelerate the potential of people at work. We're the people innovation experts. We draw our inspiration from the world of innovation to solve people challenges and leadership challenges and organizational culture challenges. And you can see there's some of the clients that we work with. But you're not here to hear me talk about the Innovation Beehive. You're here to hear from Mark O'Keefe, the founder of the Innovation Beehive, who is going to talk to us about employee expectations in the next normal. So Mark, without further ado, over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Hello everyone, very nice to see so many people online with us this morning. So gosh, we are living through times of change and disruption, aren't we? And in social, economic and organizational change and disruption, it always creates uncertainty, both for employees and for leaders. And the last few months of COVID-19 that we've all lived through is certainly the biggest disruption that many of us have had in our living history. So in our pathway to uncertainty, we laid out the 4 stages that the pandemic would go through and highlighted the questions and the skills required to navigate each stage. As we move into return and renew, leaders must confront the fact that the world of work can never be the same. While researching for this webinar, many clients told us that they have personally taken the opportunity of lockdown to reassess both their personal and their professional goals and their ambitions. This experience has really changed their expectations of their working life, and this will have both have short-term and long-term impact on the work they want to do, how they wish to be led, and the trade-off between work and life balance. As we move into a post-COVID-19 workplace, our research reveals that 51% of organizations do not have a plan to learn from lockdown. It was quite stunning actually then to also hear that 23% of HR departments do have a return to work plan, which leaves a significant amount of HR teams who still do not have a plan to help their teams return and renew. And yet, on a personal level, and certainly myself on a personal level, many have been appraising the meaning of work in their lives and the meaning of our life. So if organizations don't have the strategies to respond to the new normal, the new expectations of their employees, we believe they reduce engagement, they run the risk of reducing productivity, and potentially increased churn. So in a recent survey, 80% of employees stated that they expect their organizations to create what they called a better world of work for them. So it's vital that leaders take the time now to understand the new expectations of their employees so they're able to support, lead, and retain the best talent as they navigate the return to work. So I'm hoping that this webinar will support you as you create strategies to respond to the new expectations of your workforce.
Thanks, Mark. So we're really eager to hear from you. As you've joined this webinar, you've obviously got an interest in employee expectations in the next normal. So before we dig into what our research has shown us, we would love to hear from you to understand what you see as the employee expectations in the next normal. So check out the chat box, and I'll just send a quick note in that now so that you can find it. And feel free to post your thoughts on what are the employee expectations in the next normal.
Yeah, I'd love to know if you've been having conversations with your employees, or all of us receive a paycheck. All of us to some extent, whether you own a business, whether you work for a business, all of us ultimately are employees, and we will have new expectations, changed expectations, or maybe some of your previous expectations have been confirmed. So it'd be lovely to hear from a couple of participants around what they believe the new expectations will be.
And actually, anyone who's joining us on Facebook, we're live streaming on Facebook as well, folks. Feel free to type in the comments and I'll be sure to bring those into the webinar as well. Oh, we've got some coming in. So Angela has said that she expects safety to be a top priority. Absolutely, yeah. And we're actually going to talk about that a bit later, aren't we? More working from home while still getting the right amount of support from managers. Absolutely, Helen. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really true. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about where people are going to be working later in the webinar, aren't we? Zach has said flexible working hours, flexible goal setting for the team based on different working locations and communication. Yes, an interesting perspective about the relationship between work locations, working hours and goals. Interesting.
And actually people are reassessing the goals. I know certainly as a small business owner, we were very much driven by our P&L, what our turnover was, whether we're winning new projects. Now actually when people weren't buying, we had to look at our expectations and say, what goals do we have? And we're very proud of the fact that over 700 people have engaged with us during lockdown in these webinars and our white papers. That's a significant goal. Some of them actually wonderfully have turned into projects. Some of them haven't. We hope they might in the future. But setting a goal to say we want to keep our brand out there, we want to keep it top of mind, we want to let people know we're here and we're helping them. That was a new goal for us that worked really, really well.
And Catherine has done some research. They've done some consultation in their organisation, and employees want a new hybrid of home and work location working. That's great. It's great to know you've done some research as well. I think a big thing for employees at the moment is feeling listened to. So it's good that you are consulting with them. And Matt has said current focus is safety. And safety in the context of work from home. Is that what you mean, Matt? Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in any case. And the role of the workplace is likely to change. And yeah, I don't want to step on your shoes with what you're going to talk about later.
But we did a webinar last week, which was about returning to work. And we pointed out the fact that working from home for many is actually very difficult. It is, in fact, a privilege to be able to work from home. It particularly suits knowledge workers that many individuals may not be able to work from home. And leaders will have to deal with an expectation of, well, how are you in a world when we're looking for more diversity and more equality? Are we looking at other people's expectations, other people's lived experiences and accommodating them as well? So let's get straight into what our research revealed, and thank you to those colleagues and those leaders who helped us form the basis of this webinar and our subsequent white paper, which will be coming out next week. The first area I want to talk about, and some of you mentioned it there, is around flexible working. So it's been estimated that during lockdown, 50%, as much as 50% of the US population were working from home. That's incredible. And over the last few years, we've seen a significant increase in flexible working, people working part-time, more people working perhaps on a Friday at home or on a Monday at home, but this has grown exponentially as a result of lockdown. So whilst our individual experiences of remote working has varied, often depending on personal circumstances and other pressures like homeschooling, illness, certainly if you live in the rural economy like we do, broadband capability and capacity, negotiating with family members about you can't watch that Netflix movie now because I've got a conference call with my line manager. Our research has shown that employees do not want to return to working in pre-lockdown working patterns. So organisations can absolutely expect their employees to request more flexible working and, as Zach has pointed out, more flexible locations for work. So even if the majority of the workforce does not end up working from home ultimately, many organisations are rethinking the role of the head office. We see potentially the establishment of regional hubs when it's safe to do so, the increase of hot desking, not actually having functional desks in the office, and a more geographically distributed workforce. This could provide a greater work-life balance for employees and for employers also open up the recruitment pool for new talent. So if being located in a commutable distance from the office is no longer a priority for employers or employees, the employers are therefore able to cast their recruitment net wider and look for talent in geographical areas that they'd previously not considered. The second area that our research says is top of mind for people in the new post-COVID-19 world is around less hierarchy and more empowerment. There was no playbook for global pandemic. Leaders did not and could not have had all of the answers. Now, many of them demonstrated high levels of inclusive leadership and crowdsourced solutions to the new emerging challenges from their people. We all learned to utilize the toolkit of the innovator, rapidly prototyping and testing new solutions to new, unexpected, and previously unknown problems, learning quickly what worked, what didn't work, and then trying alternative solutions. And it's something that Zach teaches in his innovation capability classes. Pre-lockdown, really it was for innovation teams. Now, whether you're a CEO or whether you're a frontline staff, we've all had to draw upon the innovator's toolkit. Employees have become much more creative in their thinking and much more agile in their ways of working. And our research shows that employees do not wish to return to a more traditional way of working. They want to continue to flex this new creative muscle and have the freedom to experiment and solve their own problems. Many leaders told us that they were surprised at how adaptable and how collaborative their teams have been during lockdown. And it's unlikely, in the short term at least, that we'll be able to return to any semblance of business as usual. High levels of empowerment ultimately are born out of high levels of trust. As we weren't able to see our colleagues or our direct reports face to face, we simply had to trust them to get on with the job. And leaders and colleagues weren't disappointed as people rallied around the cause of just carrying on during the pandemic. Now, savvy leaders will leverage this new skill set, this innovator's toolkit, to turbocharge their organization's response to the challenges that will emerge as we return to a post-COVID-19 workplace.
Thank you, Mark. We've got another question for you, which is sort of lurking in the black and white image behind the hierarchy that just collapsed. So, how do you think leaders will need to lead in a post-COVID-19 workplace? That's how do you think leaders will need to lead in a post-COVID-19 workplace? What are some of the thoughts you have on that?
And again, if you want to pop your answers or your thoughts in the chat function, and also any comments on our Facebook Live, Joe will be able to access them and read them out.
So we've got one already. Focus on output of effort, not on the effort itself, combined with supporting the way of working for each individual to ensure maximum output. I think it's a really interesting point, actually, isn't it? That we can all feel that we're looking busy, or we can all look busy.
Being busy fools.
Being busy fools. That's a wonderful phrase.
My grandmother's.
What else do people think? I think that's a really great point there about the output and the outcomes. That's something that when I'm designing learning programs, I'm always thinking about what are the outcomes rather than the inputs or even the outputs. What do we get to at the end of it?
You know, and personally, as people start to think about theirs, I'll share one of mine. You know, I lead a team at the Innovation Beehive. Previous to this, we worked in a European-funded growth hub in Cirencester and had a small outpost office in London. And we turned up, you know, between 8 and 9 in the morning. We went home between 5 and 7 o'clock at night, depending on how busy we were. But I expected people, when they're at work, to be at work. And now, actually, with my team, we've got a lot more flexible. People might say, I'm going to take an hour out. One of my colleagues has talked about having a bit of a nap in the afternoon. And that's given me permission sometimes just to go and take 15 minutes out, sit in a chair, have some silence, not work, and refuel. And I think as we've got used to pulling those coping mechanisms in, there's an expectation that we'll still be able to deliver our workload, but we won't necessarily have to go back to being at work and visible presenteeism as we had previously.
And just to speak into that point, Mark, I think there's also a point about role modeling as a leader. So actually being the one who goes for a nap in the afternoon might be a highly appropriate thing to do for your team to show them that that is something that is acceptable. But we've had a couple more comments come in. So trust is huge. Not just managers having trust in their teams, but also team members trusting each other. Yeah, that's a good point. And making sure people feel everything is done fairly. We are all in different circumstances. And that point reminds me of a phrase that came up when I was working in the charity sector. We talked a lot about equality and diversity, and someone talked to me about the difference between equity and equality. And the point being that we're all in different circumstances. So actually we all have different needs. It's not about giving everybody the same. It's about giving people what they need in order to deliver that outcome and that output that Zach was talking about in his comment.
Great, thank you for sharing. It's great. We'll ask a couple more questions throughout the webinar. It's lovely to hear your points of view as well. Some of them reflecting what our research has shown and some of them new. So great. The next area I want to talk about is human and authentic connection. So here we are in our dining room. Just before we went into lockdown, we were launching a new white paper at Google in central London, had over 50 clients together talking about how you can lead through disruption. The timing could not have been better, we found out as a result. But here we are, several weeks later, running webinars in our dining room, making sure that the surface behind us is a lot clearer. But as we all got used to operating from our kitchen tables, our dining rooms, our spare bedrooms, we gained a unique insight into each other's lives. We saw each other's wallpapers, our fancy mirrors. We comforted each other on our tough days. We hung out in virtual coffee mornings and in team quiz nights. We met our communities on our doorsteps on Thursday night to clap for carers and the key workers. We organised volunteer armies to shop for the vulnerable in our community. And millions of us responded to the government's call to support the NHS. As a result of this, though, the positional power that leaders often hold in a hierarchy has been dissipated, as we could never have expected that we would get to know each other in such an intimate way, in a way that we could never have got just over the staff canteen lunch or in a team building day. Our research shows that employees want to hold on to these genuine human connections, to be met and understood for themselves and for their whole selves going forward. Prior to lockdown, 66% of people planning to leave work stated that their reasons for doing so was due to lack of communication. Now, whilst many people are starting to talk about Zoom fatigue, the emphasis that organisations has placed on communicating with their employees, both those who are furloughed and both those who are in work, it really should be built upon in a post-COVID-19 workplace. We've got another comment come through actually about leaders.
So Matt has said it's about how to inspire teams and convey a new vision, but completely remotely, which I actually think speaks into what you were talking about being human and authentic, doesn't it? In Leadership 4.0, which is the white paper that we released at Google on the 3rd of March, way before lockdown, one of the leadership dynamics is leading in heart as well as leading in head. And I think that's what you're speaking into there, Matt, that actually a combination of understanding what your vision is in the next normal, but also how to convey it effectively in a remote context is probably quite important. And
we'll actually be running a webinar at the end of July or beginning of August on leading with purpose, about realigning, refacing your organisation around the purpose and moving forward together into a future. The next area I want to talk about is well-being. So at the beginning of the pandemic, many of us felt tied to our laptops. There was an unconscious expectation that we'd always be on and available to take an email or take a call or answer an email 24/7. And this was exhausting. Many of us really reported high levels of exhaustion, not only because of the underlying anxiety of COVID-19, but also the fact we felt we always had to be at work. And that separation between home and work really disappeared. But as we moved into the sustain phase on the pathway through uncertainty, our research revealed that employees became great at creating structures and processes to support their well-being as they worked from home. Whether it was an honest conversation with the boss about childcare responsibilities, putting a dedicated lunch break into an Outlook calendar, or downloading the Couch to 5K app, which has been downloaded over 800,000 times in the United Kingdom since the beginning of lockdown. Many of us took time out to protect our own well-being. A study by Gallup revealed that 44% of people regularly experience feelings of burnout. And University College London research among civil servants concluded that employees who regularly work for more than 7 hours a day are 60% more likely to have a chance of heart disease. Research shows that 15% of people in work have the symptoms of a mental health issue, and 9 out of 10 individuals with a mental health issue report their experience of stigma due to this. Calls to employee assistant helplines significantly over-index around feelings of stress and anxiety. And a significant cause of anxiety can be money worries. with predictions of unemployment potentially reaching 9%, and over 53% of the UK working population stating they are concerned about losing their job. The challenge to maintain our well-being is only likely to rise in significance for employees and employers as we return to work, as furlough schemes begin to be wound down, and the real implications of a shrinking economy come to light. So whilst there are many aspects of well-being that are beyond an employer's control, they do have a duty of care to protect and support their employees. As a society, we began to have much more open and honest conversations around all aspects of well-being, including mental health. It's likely that employees will turn to their employer for support with issues such as dealing with bereavement, maybe redundancies of a family member or a partner, and the mental fallout and fatigue from the pandemic. Employers will need to equip their line managers with the skills to manage these conversations appropriately, ensure that information is available to guide their employees to the appropriate professional service and support that's available. At a bare minimum, employees would expect an acknowledgement of the move from furlough status to returning to work will be emotionally and mentally draining for many people who spent months at home and are now suddenly expected to go back into the workplace and operate at 100% capacity. It's just not going to be possible. And we heard people talking about having to move up from gear 1 or neutral to gear 1, 2, 3, 4, and ultimately 5. You can't come back to work after being furloughed for 3, 4 months, maybe even 5, and then be expected to operate at gear 5. If you are, mental health issues and anxiety will definitely increase. So organisations should take the opportunity now to review their wellbeing strategy and ensure that it's fit for purpose for all of the new expectations in a post-COVID-19 workplace.
Well, before you jump on to the next section, can I just chip in there? And the one word that really stuck out for me is in that last sentence, the word strategy. I think well-being has often been something that's kind of on the periphery, hasn't it?
Discounts at a yoga class.
Yeah, and now it's about bringing it into the forefront for leaders and for organizations to really think, how does this become a strategy for our people, and how do we deliver it in a way that actually thinks about the outcomes rather than the inputs.
The next area actually has already been raised and really is the one that people talked about, certainly in the short term, being the highest level of their expectation. So many of us are going to return to a workplace that's unrecognisable from the one we left pre-lockdown. Temperature checks, one-way traffic flows, cohort working, and increasingly distributed geographical workforce will simply become, certainly in the short term, the new normal. Employees tell us they expect their organisations to put their safety at the absolute top of their priority list. They have concerns about using public transport to commute to work. This can to some extent be answered by providing things like bike racks or more car parking spaces, but this will not be a solution for minimum wage or frontline workers, particularly in built-up urban environments. This could impact on mental well-being and result in increasing anxiety levels and staff absence. And data coming out of China shows that whilst absenteeism in China was running at about 5% before lockdown, absenteeism taking illness out during the first return to work phase was topping at 20% of people just too anxious or not feeling comfortable with their commute to work. And in China, a lot of employees actually live on site. They just didn't want to leave their homes or their living units because they didn't feel safe and they didn't feel their employers were putting the right safety measures in place. Employers should really over-index on the measures they're taking to keep their people safe. And one way we think they can do this is consider setting up structures to listen and respond to staff concerns. Doing it virtually, doing it now, contracting with people about what they expect and how the organisation can deliver upon that is absolutely what we should be focusing on. For one of our large clients, we've been running a series of online listening sessions with 2 or 3 key areas that we start people discussing around, and then asking them, what's the new normal expectations for you, or your expectations of us as employer? And then taking back to that to the people leadership team and the exec to say, how does our people and operational strategy and how do we deliver our product in an environment that is safe for our people? And thinking about brand trust scores, certainly we're hearing out there in the marketplace, consumers and customers are looking at how organizations are keeping their people safe, what signals they're sending out about putting the safety of their people as a number one priority, and voting with their feet or their online money as to what employer or what organizations they will support. Those that are vocal about really taking steps to put their safety of their employees number one will win quicker in a post-COVID-19 world.
And that, of course, is both because they're able to deliver their product or service better in the context that they're in, but also, as you say, because people are looking for that, both as customers and employees.
They're looking for the clues, they're looking for the signals. Whereas their expectations before might have been about speed of delivery or about those extra touches of customer service. They're concerned about their safety, and they want to know that organizations actually are putting the safety of their employees at number one.
So we'd love to know from you, what have you been talking to your team about around safety concerns? What have you been hearing from them? What have you identified as the major obstacles to safety or the major opportunities there are for building a safer environment? I mean, who would have thought that a slide that was about safety 4 months ago, 5 months ago, we would have had a picture of someone sanitizing their hands. But there you are, that's the world we're living in now. So what are the safety concerns that you're hearing from your people? We'd love to hear them, and we'll share them with the group.
Do you have any yourself? We're all employees. Do you have any concerns about returning to work on a personal level? You know, we've really pivoted and adapted the way that we deliver our online programs and our consulting projects. We're now using online collaboration tools. We're running our training programs through either our learning platform or through Zoom and Teams. I've got a concern that, you know, when our first client says, I want to run this session face to face, how I have a conversation with my team about it, how I feel about standing in a room of 10 or 12 people and talking about innovation or people challenges. That's something we'll all have to deal with and will potentially impact on our well-being and our state of mind and our ability to deliver the job. But if I know that we're being looked after and our safety is a priority, both for my colleagues and for our client, then I'll feel better placed to be able to say yes and deliver that workshop, because we will have to go back to working alongside each other to some extent on some days during the week at some point in the future.
And an interesting comment has come in from someone who works in L&D. I was talking to a trainer yesterday who was having to run a workshop with a mask on. Not impossible, but a new challenge. Now, as someone who works in L&D myself, I know how important it is for L&D professionals to be able to read the room. Now, if everyone is wearing a mask, that creates a completely different dynamic in terms of interaction and engagement. And actually, to me, personally, I feel I'd rather do it over Zoom and look at people's faces on Zoom.
But you know what? I mean, I was running a session earlier on this week with some clients in China, a Zoom session. We were idea generating around a new onboarding program using a collaboration platform. And our Chinese delegates were sitting together around a table, all with masks on. So even over Zoom, I didn't really read the room. So my alternative strategy was I had a list of everyone's name and kept naming them individually to kind of call them out, because it's possible potentially as a delegate to hide behind the mask and not include yourself. And I want in our sessions for our delegates to be completely immersed in the learning experience.
Yeah, and another point coming in, concerns most recently communicated have been returning to the office and the commute involved, as it runs the risk of high exposure, which is a big anxiety trigger. Yeah, and the commute is something that I think people came to a little later than they started working on the office, and then people suddenly thought, how are people going to get here? And the commute is actually, I'm not relishing the idea of going on the tube to go to a meeting when that happens again. Or, we're in talks with a company in the Middle East about potentially running some face-to-face training out there. Don't know when that's going to happen, but it'll only happen when it's safe to do so.
The idea is getting on an aeroplane fills us with some anxiety. And one of our clients, their CEO, said our office will open, but you are absolutely able to work from home until you are comfortable to come into the office, and there is no judgment and no expectation that you will not work from home until the end of the year at least.
A really interesting observation has just come in. Some people are saying that their colleagues are not taking safety seriously enough. So that's another dynamic, actually, isn't it? The dynamic of feeling like other people are letting you down or letting the organization down by not respecting the rules, by not sticking to the one-way systems, by not wearing a mask, not sanitizing, etc. And I think that there's going to be an interesting dynamic that plays out there from a cultural perspective around how do people deal with that? How do people call that out, and what's the role of the leader in calling that out?
Because we've all been massively affected, whether the business has been affected, whether people are affected personally through ill health or financially. We've all gone through massive hardships. And if we see someone who's just disregarding health and safety after all of the effort and the hardship we've put in, it's certainly going to be a difficult conversation. So
thank you, everyone.
The last area I want to talk about has really come sharply into focus, and it came out very clearly as top of mind: diversity and inclusion. So I think we've seen really high levels of inclusive leadership during the pandemic, and the global outpouring of support for Black Lives Matter has brought the issue of diversity and inclusion really sharply into focus. As many organisations relied on public funding to furlough staff, we believe, and our research shows, that employees are feeling more empowered to express their opinion over the general leadership and running of the business and their expectations of the levels of representation within that business. We can expect to see increased involvement with external third-party representatives, such as trade unions, as we move into a post-COVID-19 world. As taxpayers' money was used to keep businesses afloat, tax-paying employees feel more justified in calling out what they see as injustice or lack of representation. Additionally, it's been suggested that women and the lowest paid workers are more likely to be at risk of redundancy as a result of the global pandemic. Employers should be aware that a heightened societal awareness of the lack of opportunity and discrimination against the BAME community, coupled with employees' increasingly willingness to challenge organisational strategy, could lead to increasingly complex leadership challenges as they, at the same time, seek to reduce cost and continue to operate in a faltering economy. Now, the key to resolving this dilemma is to develop a robust diversity and inclusion strategy, not just a knee-jerk reaction to media events, and to do that in consultation with a fully representative stakeholder, and equipping leaders at the same time with the appropriate legal and communication skills they will need to have those difficult and challenging conversations. So we've shared with you the outputs of our research. We've shared with you that as we return to work and deal with the fallout from the global pandemic, the world of work will be significantly impacted in the short term. There were 6 things that we shared with you this morning. And the first of those are people's expectations around flexible working. That as a result of the lockdown, we've seen a reduction in hierarchy and people feeling more empowered and want to keep these empowerment and these new agile skills and flex their creative muscles and continue to flex them as they go back into the workplace. That human and authentic connection that we have gained, the dissipation of positional power, we'd like to see that continued and really understand each other and meet each other where we are as we go back into the workplace. Well-being, not just about some yoga classes or a few sun salutations or some private healthcare benefits. Well-being being financial, being mental, being physical, all aspects of well-being are sharply into focus. And employees expect their employers to have a robust well-being strategy and also put their safety of themselves and their customers as a number one priority. Underneath that, I'd say bubbling up as number 2 as an increased focus on diversity and inclusion. Employers need to be aware of when they are looking to reduce their workforce, whether they are discriminating against particular members of society, and also be aware that as they've taken taxpayers' money, their employees and their customers may feel more focused and have more rights to comment on how the organisation is run. Many of us reflected during the lockdown on the meaning of both our personal and our professional lives, and our expectations of what we want now from our work has changed. Whilst there'll be some short-term changes, there'll be some long-term changes too. We believe, and our research plays out, that the world of work will never really be the same again. But through open communication, the gathering of insight and data from our employees around what's important to them now, leaders will be able to face their teams forward as they return back to work, to create their new post-pandemic tomorrow, building upon the increased digital capability that we all have with a more human, more connected workforce that hopefully is able to strike a better balance between work and home life. So I hope this has been useful to you to understand the outputs of our research, to hear the 6 things that our colleagues and our customers and our clients have been telling us. I'd like to invite you now to share with us in the chat box any other expectations that we didn't hear from our research that you might have heard or that you might have yourself. So what other expectations do you believe people might have apart from the 6 that are shown on the screen?
Yeah, one of our values at the Innovation Beehive is be better than before. And one of the questions that we ask when we're conducting insight interviews is, what else? What else? So since we've got some leaders on the call now, we'd love to say, what else might there be that we haven't seen yet? And then we can be better than before, and you can share your insights from the conversations you've had with your people. So we've had one come through. I think there will also be an expectation of trust, open communication, and honesty. Absolutely. And I think that plays out in the human and authentic communication. And I think trust is going to be so important going forward.
And the whole thing about trust is it makes an assumption. It's what I know now, what I believe, what will happen in the future, what needs to happen. The gap in between is where trust sits. It's that assumed expectation that we are all working on the same plan. And if suddenly that trust is broken, IKEA talk about in their organisation the trust bubble that leaders hold, almost like the bubble that you see at children's birthday parties, but before lockdown when they were blowing bubbles. Leaders hold that bubble in their hands, and once it bursts, it's impossible to put it back together again. So the need to really think strategically around employees' expectations, not just put knee-jerk policies or reactions in place, have open dialogue, set up formal structures to discuss with people what are your expectations now, will best equip you to meet both your employees' expectations, the employees of your customers, and ultimately keep your business operating in a post-COVID-19 world.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And Helen has just come through and said, I think people will want to bring their whole selves to work as they're having to do now. Absolutely. And I think a lot of the expectations are kind of pointing towards that, aren't they? Pointing towards a sense of, bringing more of myself, but also having more time for myself or more flexibility in the time that I have.
That thing about bringing your whole self, and you talked about role modeling. So I was on a call with an HR director a couple of weeks ago and with his team. And he was running the call from the garden. And at first, my typical, what? He's in the garden. What's he doing? He's not working. And I think actually, when I took a moment to pause and think about it, he was absolutely role modeling. You don't have to be chained to your desk. It's important to get outside. It's important to move around your place of work, even when you're in lockdown. He was living well-being and role modeling it and being his whole self. And he said, I've just been stuck inside all day. I really needed a bit of a break. I know I had this call to do. I wanted some fresh air. So my internet might be a bit crap, but please bear with me. I just needed some vitamin D. And it was wonderful. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Catherine has posed a really good question, actually. I think we need to rethink how we maintain culture with a mixture of people working in different locations, etc. Now, that's a really interesting point. And we do a lot of work on culture with organizations, applying the innovation process to answer that exact question. And one of the challenges that I think people have had in the past is that they've thought, well, we've got our values on the wall in reception, that's culture done. But we've always said culture is more than that. Culture is the conversations that you have. Culture is the signals that leaders send. We use a tool called the culture web that sort of breaks all of these down. And I think, that if you Google culture web, you'll find it. And I think it's a really good way of starting to think about culture for your organization in the next normal. And Nikki has commented that there's, with greater expectation that businesses are going to better manage priorities and workload. And she uses the phrase that I really like, blurred lines, because there's going to be a strain on individuals with workload coming in to their sitting room or to their dining room or to their kitchen. There's a blurred line between what is work and what is home, and where is work and where is home, and when is work and when is home. And actually, maybe businesses have a responsibility to help people navigate that. I think that's a really, really good point. Thank you so much, everyone. That is really, really interesting insight. to add into the mix. And yeah, thank you for sharing so openly.
And we're creating our white paper as a result of this webinar today. And I'm going to, one of our phrases at the Innovation Beehive is steal with glee. So I will steal with glee some of the comments there, and look out.
Yeah, so thank you. That'll be in your mailboxes by the end of this week. So like on the screen, you will see some details about an on-demand program that we've created about leading your team to return. We've created this to help leaders to think about the main factors they need to consider when leading their teams to return. It talks about a lot of the issues that we've identified in terms of what are the expectations for the next normal. It's bursting with amazing content, as you can see on the screen there. And there's a little video that will show you what that content might look like.
Oh, that's marvelous.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I'm really proud of that. So it's got content, it's got video, it's got tools, it's got templates, and it's about preparing for your team to return safely in the next normal. And it's about that, it looks at it from a cultural perspective, but also from a practical perspective. So there's elements of tactical and there's elements of strategic in there. It's got a really good blend. And you'll see here, there's a QR code. So all you need to do, Mark is going to demonstrate for us now. Hold your camera phone up to the screen, turn on the camera, and that'll open the website on your mobile. And when you register, be sure to use the 50% discount code WELCOME-RETURN50. That's WELCOME-RETURN50, and you'll get 50% off the £99 cover price. But the main thing I want to say, Mark, is thank you so much for your amazing webinar today. I think, you know, it's one of your best, as every one of them is. You know, be better than before. You're better every week. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for contributing to the webinar as well. It was great to get so much engagement from such a variety of people on the call. Thank you. Look out for the recording in your mailbox tomorrow, along with a link to the white paper to download completely free. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. See you again soon. We've got a webinar next week, which is about creating return champions and thinking about all of the different considerations you need there. That's going to be run by our colleague, Zach, and I'll send you details about that in the email tomorrow. But final thank you to Mark, final thank you to you, and final thank you to anyone who joined us on Facebook Live. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.